Our first reading is from Psalm 27. It's a thanksgiving song of confidence. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I asked of the Lord, and this I seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent, and he will set me high on a rock. Now my head is lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in this tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make my melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. Come, my heart says, seek his face. Your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me, and do not turn your servant away in anger, you who have been my help. Do not cast me off. Do not forsake me, O God of my salvation. If my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Do not give me up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they are breathing out violence. I believe that I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. A New Testament reading is from Philippians in the 3rd chapter. Brothers and sisters, join in imitating me and observe those who live according to the example you have in us. For many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. I have often told you of them, and now I tell you even again with tears. Their end is destruction. Their God is the belly, and their glory is in their shame. Their minds are set on earthly things. But our citizenship is in heaven, and it is from there that we are expecting a Saviour, the Lord Jesus Christ. He will transform the body of our humiliation, that it may be conformed to the body of his glory, by the power that also enables him to make all things subject to himself. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, my beloved. The Gospel reading is from Luke, 13th chapter. At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to him, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me, listen, I'm casting out demons, performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I'll finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day, I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" Lord, may your word live in us
and bear much fruit to your glory. Who finds Psalm 27 one of their favourite psalms? Anyone? Yep. There's a whole lot of things in Psalm 27 that speak to us. The Lord is the light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? I had an interesting experience this morning. As I sat down listening to Barry, I saw something that I hadn't seen for many weeks. You notice that we turned the light down for you today? And in the midst of that, I actually noticed, Judy, I'm not sure whether it'll pick up on the camera, but I actually noticed something happening here and on the floor. Don't know whether you can see it. Can anyone see what's happening on the purple there? It's shimmering, yep. Why would that be, do you reckon? Because of the fans. There's a light up there, there's a fan underneath, and we've got this strobe effect happening. And I found Barry, while I kept seeing it out of the corner of my eye. And once you see something out of the corner of your eye, you really find it hard not to see it, don't you? But it was only because the big light was not as bright outside, the sun, that actually this was more visible and distracted. See, we can be distracted by something that gets in the way of the light like that. Most of us, I suspect, when we go to parties when they have those strobe lights on, are not looking to look too closely at those sort of things, because as we get older, and some people find it actually very detrimental to their health to have strobing lights. So that which distracts us. So the psalmist is saying, the Lord is the light and my salvation. But the psalm is also saying that we can be distracted by our fears, by our doubts, by our sense of injustice. The evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. That sense of justice can be very strong for us, particularly in the times when we are feeling a bit vulnerable. And maybe we feel the odds are stacked a little bit against us. We can really feel the effect of someone that we think is working against us or is not wishing the best for us. The psalmist talks about those encamped against me. My heart shall not fear, though war rise against me. In the past week, I'm sure people who have got shares and people who are concerned about world peace, there's been times where we have been concerned about what's happening around us. But the psalmist says, yet I will be confident. And what's the psalmist confident in? One thing I ask of the Lord, this I seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Now on Wednesday night we were talking about what is this house of the Lord, and we were saying that it's actually an image that's got a whole lot of different meanings, isn't it? Because the word that's used there can mean the tabernacle in the wilderness, it could mean the temple, it could mean the house, our family house, our household, but also Paul talked about Jesus being the new temple. It's being in relationship, being in a place where we feel safe and nurtured. One thing I ask of the Lord, this I seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will set me high on a rock. And most of us would be able to remember and tell a story of where we have felt that God has watched over us, protected us and helped us in those times where we feel we haven't been able to right the boat of our life ourselves and we've needed help in the midst of those situations. Now my head is lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices and shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. The psalmist is saying that sometimes when we're in those situations, it's not just our individual, we need to connect with our trust of faith in God. Sometimes we need to be with other people of faith. Sometimes it's the liturgy, sometimes it's the hymns, sometimes it's the being together that we actually can help us in the midst of those times when we just feel that we're in trouble and things are not going well. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud, be gracious to me and answer me. Come, my heart says, seek his face. Your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You who have been my help, do not cast me off or not forsake me, O God of salvation. The psalmist is expressing, I pick up in that sometimes God can hide us, sometimes God can cover us, protect us, and sometimes what God does is help us to face the difficulty that we're facing, to acknowledge how difficult it is, and to rise above the noise that we hear in our own hearts and minds that is distracting us from hearing what God might want to be saying to us. If my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up. Even if our family are not supportive of us in that time of difficulty, God will help us. And then verse 11, teach me your way, O God, and lead me on a new level path because of my enemies. In a podcast of Leaving Egypt this week, I was listening and it was talking about the difficulty the church is facing it was someone I think from North America, but the decline of the church in numbers and influence and those things. And they were describing that as in a time where the world is facing many anxieties, where things are not as good as what they were, and potentially in the future we're wondering where they will go. The church is facing decline and having to close a number of its churches. And the thing I found helpful about the comment that this person made was almost suggesting that this is God's gift to the church. Closing churches, you could see it as God's gift to the church. The reason why he says that is because the church is experiencing what it means to experience loss. A time of change where the things that have been, the way things have been before, is no longer happening in the way that we have found helpful in the past. A time of change, a time of trouble, where we need to turn to God to actually help us to see where do we go in the midst of this difficult situation. And the reason why he describes that as gift, not quite the way his words, but this is what I got out of what he was saying. Maybe God's allowing this to happen to the church so that we can learn what it is and pass through this time, because the suggestion was that the world is going to face the same issues in the way the world is operating in the future. By the church going through this time of struggle and difficulty and change, it puts us in touch with the resources that God gives us to deal with change, difficulties, and we might be able to share those resources with a world that is struggling in the midst of the change that's happening for it. Because what he's describing is that what's happening in the wider society is not something that if you had all the money in the world would fix, because that was the goal and it hasn't worked. And not everyone can have all the money because it's got to be shared in some way. And that it's not about power being used over people, and actually as long as we can get the right set of power levers, everything will be fixed. Because we're watching how that doesn't work so well. It's about relationships. And that whatever we face in the future as a country, as a community, it's the relationships that are going to be the important thing that helps us in the midst of that situation. He talks about becoming little islands of stability. Now, I looked that up, what little islands of stability was, and there was this whole page about islands and how something about underneath them and how they become stable. And I thought, that's a bit hard. I won't do that today. But that sense of islands of stability, islands where we've actually got a confidence that God is holding us in the midst of the change that we've learnt at the moment. We've learnt it before at different times, but we're having to reconnect with that because of what's happening with the church. And maybe God is preparing us for a way of actually helping people in a community that is struggling with the changes that it's facing, where the things that we thought led to the good life may not be available in the same way as they were. So the question is, how do we respond? The psalm goes on. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on the level path. That's what Jesus was saying to the Pharisees, warning him, wasn't it? The path that God leads Jesus on is different to the path the Pharisees were concerned about. But he wasn't going to stop because of that concern. He was going to keep going. And he knew where that was going to end up, in Jerusalem. Then the psalmist writes, Do not give me up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they are breathing out violence. We live in a time where it's very hard to find what the truth is sometimes in a situation. Because it's a bit like, I know someone who, whenever they make a mistake, it's never their fault. It's always someone else's fault. And that's partly because of the way their brain works. But that's if they can't admit that they've done something wrong. It's always someone else that's caused that. How do we recognise what's truth in the midst of what's happening? How do we find that support that God offers to us, that level path that God offers for us? Verse 13, I believe that I see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. It's that distraction of something blocking the light out, not allowing that to be what we focus on, but to focus on the true light that gives life and fullness of life, is one way of thinking about that, verse 13. Verse 14, wait for the Lord, be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Whatever's happening in our life at this moment, or the life of people that we love and care for, sometimes we just need to wait for that word, for that way, for us to understand the teaching enough to know how to respond to that situation. Waiting on God is about, it's not a passive process. It's not like, when there are some people, if you say that you're going to pick them up at 10 o'clock, and you sort of think, yeah, I'll get there about 10 o'clock, and you actually find that they're one of those people that as soon as it turns 10 o'clock, they're going, they're late. We're 10 o'clock. Waiting, active waiting, is much more listening and watching. It's waiting for that opportunity, waiting for that time when the sail is lifted enough off the water so that actually you're able to pull it up. Because you don't have the strength to pull it up until that vacuum is broken. Looking for the way that God is going to help in your situation, or wisdom in the situation of someone else. And that's what Paul is talking about in the letter to Ephesians. Being an example and learning that those people, those situations where people are relying on the culture and things that have power and things that are outside of us to respond, that God offers us a different way. As we think about the things that we face today and in the future, as we wait patiently on the Lord for what our mission is in our new building, as we wait patiently to see what our new possible relationship might be with the other congregations within the Bayside area, as we look for what God is wanting to do in our life and the lives of people around us, waiting and responding with acts of love, justice, and mercy is what God calls us to.